With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. So, we finally heard from the Redskins offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, or at least the Redskins media have heard from them, as this was the first time they have spoken to the Redskins media corps on a conference call. I talked about Scott Turner and kind of piecing together what was said through transcripts and being transcribed by the media members on the conference call. Want to first give a shout out to Hogs Haven and what they were able to do on their website, kind of compiling all of the tweets from the various members of the media and putting them all into one place so that we could have this discussion and talk about what was said by the Redskins' new defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio. He spoke on various topics. Let me just be very frank with you. Jack Del Rio isn't one for a bunch of words. He doesn't want to give away a lot of information, and that's actually quite refreshing, especially after having a guy like Bill Callahan as the head coach. And look, the defensive coordinator last year didn't want to talk very much, but it was because he wasn't very good at his job, and Greg Minuski. So we really didn't care what he had to say, but his press conferences were straight to the point. They never answered any questions. And so you're going to get more of the same with Del Rio, but he's actually answering the questions that he wants to answer. And so I didn't have a problem with anything that was or wasn't said. Let's jump into what he had to say. And once again, want to thank all of the media members that were transcribing via Twitter, and want to thank Hogs Haven for being able to put all of this into one place for us to get this information. And now I'm relaying it to you. So this is what Jack Del Rio had to say at his presser. So we start with the first comments made by Del Rio, and it's the defensive line, and we've talked ad nauseum about this defensive line. The Redskins have invested first round draft capital all over this defensive line, whether you're talking the Bama boys in Payne and Allen, or you're talking about Montez Sweat. These are all first round picks, former first round picks. Even Kerrigan is a former first round pick. So Ioannidis, maybe the best of the entire group. He's I believe a fifth round pick, but no matter what you want to talk about, the defensive line right now is the strength, the perceived strength of this team. And at Kyle F. Stackpole says, Del Rio said the Redskins want to have a penetrating and disruptive defensive line. I think we're going to see more of that with a four-man front. Less of that with the three-down man front, because when you've got three down linemen, they're looking to eat up space. They're looking to usually two gap, meaning they're responsible for the gap next to them and the gap, either gap on either side and the gap next to that one. So they're supposed to be eating up space essentially and allowing the linebackers to roam, and they're not looking to get into the backfield and make plays. When you play a 4-3, you allow guys a lot of times to be one gap penetrators. They don't have to worry about the gap next to them or the gap next to the gap next to them. They just got to worry about the gap that's right there in front of them and penetrating that gap. So at Matthew_Paris says, Jack Del Rio says his defense starts with the defensive line. He said he coached Von Miller in Denver and Khalil Mack in Oakland. So, again, I talked about that when Del Rio was first hired, and those are two big names on his resume, which lends me to believe that adding a guy like Chase Young makes the most sense, because those are the types of players. When he had top 5 defenses in both Carolina and in Denver, it was really spearheaded by those big-time pass rushers. Now, in Oakland, I don't think he ever was fully in control of the defense because he was the head coach. He allowed other guys to run the defense. He probably had some input and some say-so on the defensive side of the football. But to me, it makes a lot of sense to go out and get a guy like Chase Young, speaking of which, we'll talk about him here in a second. But you talk about the defensive talent on this team, or the Redskins' talent in general. And I've fluctuated back and forth on whether this team is uber talented or not. Here's what Del Rio had to say on the matter. At Kyle F. Stackpole says, Del Rio said that, quote, everybody has talent, closed quote, around the NFL. It's more about the players coming together as a cohesive unit. If you've listened to Del Rio talk, whether it's Redskins Nation with Larry Michael, or you listen to him on the Ian Rappaport Rap Sheet with Friends podcast, you've pretty much have heard him kind of echo this sentiment that everyone in the league has talent. The Redskins are no different, yada, yada, yada. So that's not something that we haven't already heard from Del Rio since taking the job. At Kareem Copeland says, Jack Del Rio not exactly concerned with the individual talent on defense, more about the ability to come together as a group. Said ultimately it's about getting the ball back for the offense by whatever means. So I love hearing that because you have to play together. Again, defense more so than offense, even though offense can be affected by one guy not doing his job. The defense more so than the offense. 10 of the 11 guys could be in sync, in lockstep, and if one guy doesn't do his job correctly, all of it could go to hell in a handbasket, and you can give up a 77-yard touchdown because one guy didn't do what he was supposed to do. And so he is exactly spot on when he says you're more worried about this unit coming together as a group because most of the year last year, the defense looked disjointed. They didn't look like a complete group. They looked like sections and factions of a defense where the secondary may play good this week. The D-line may play good next week. The linebackers may play good the week after that. But as a collective group, they never seemed to be all on the same page. There was constant miscommunication. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. And our third down defense has been bad really for the last 5 years or so. And he talks about getting the ball back by whatever means to the offense, whether it's a turnover or forcing a punt, whatever the case may be, you just got to find a way to get the ball back to your offense. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. At JP Finley NBCS says, I like Jack Del Rio's answer on the Redskins defensive talent. Quote, everybody has talent. You go across the league and it's a collection of college all-stars that play in the NFL. To say we have talent, sure we do. Everybody does. Closed quote. So again, reiterating what he said multiple times across multiple platforms, that he's not making a lot of the Redskins' talent because everyone in the league has talent. Now, there are varying degrees, but we don't need to get into that as we move on to the next thing he talked about, which is Chase Young. And I talked about him initially, and I said we're going to come back to that. Here we are. At Matthew_Paris says, Jack Del Rio doesn't take the bait on evaluating Chase Young. He says he wants to study his own players first. At Instant Replay says, Jack Del Rio says he believes it's way too early to speak on players individually that have declared for the draft. He was specifically asked about Chase Young, said that the evaluation is just getting started and they're way off from final conclusions, hashtag HTTR. At JP Finley NBCS says, ask Jack Del Rio about Chase Young. Quote, that evaluation is far away from being completed, closed quote. He adds he's not going to share the evaluation even when it's done. Wants to focus on his players, his own players first. Again, didn't give you much there. Not mad about that. But I'm pretty sure they're going to love Chase Young and going to want to select him if he is available at number 2. Again, this is a man that coached Julius Peppers, Von Miller, and Khalil Mack. You think he didn't want to try to get his hands on Chase Young? You'd be fooling yourself. The next couple of topics were kind of loose questions, so we added them all onto this one. The first is needs for speed. And he said, at Zach D. Selby says, Del Rio on how the league has changed. There's a lot more emphasis on spreading the field than when he was coaching with the Raiders. There's more of a need for speed on the defensive side of the ball. Hashtag Redskins, hashtag HTTR. He's absolutely spot on about that. The league has evolved. It continues to evolve. You're starting to see more of the college football game in the NFL. Thus, you have to have guys that can run, that can read and react quickly and get to the football. And so you have to have team speed defensively, something that we've lacked for years. We're starting to get faster on that side of football, but we still have a ways to go. Concerning developing players, at Kareem Copeland says, Jack Del Rio says players will have a chance to change some opinions, evaluating everyone. His goal is to reach and develop. So really what he's saying there is, look, I'm not going to come in with preconceived notions. I may have one or two in the back of my mind, but I'm going to be open-minded and I'm going to give you every opportunity for you to prove that what I saw on tape, if it wasn't flattering, isn't the real you, and that you were just playing out the string for a coach that you didn't think was going to be here next year. I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove yourself. And, you know, it never is good to put bad tape out there, which is why some guys, when they're hurt, don't play. And why, you know, at the end of seasons, you want guys to play. And that's why it was so impressive watching the Redskins, but it wasn't shocking because a lot of young players, they don't know any better. They're looking to put good tape out there because they don't know where their next check is coming from. Whereas with these veterans, they're starting to look towards the future. They know that this guy's not going to be around. And so some of them, you know, start thinking about the offseason. Well, you put on bad tape and guys that come in that are new coaches see it. And now they're thinking this is what this guy is as a player. He's going to give everyone an opportunity to prove that they belong on this roster and have the opportunity to play for his defense. We'll see what happens as we move on. Del Rio was asked about, you know, the opposition, and he pretty much said, respect everyone, but fear no one. That's going to be his message. At Instant Replay says, Del Rio, quote, will respect everyone, will fear no one, closed quote. Jack Del Rio says of the principles he believes in and what he's sharing with the players when they meet, hashtag HTTR. So that's the mindset that he's going to try to instill in his players, is that, look, we respect every opponent from the best team to the worst team in the league, but we fear no one. Best team, Super Bowl defending champion, best team in our division, whatever the case may be. We fear no one. We respect everyone. That's the mindset you're always supposed to have on the football field. It's the reason why they say any given Sunday, because anyone could get beat by anyone. See the Tennessee Titans and their run in the postseason right now. You got to respect your opponent, but you should not fear anyone. And that's what he is trying to instill in his players. He was asked about Dwayne Haskins Jr. and at Kyle F. Stackpole tweeted out, Del Rio previously served as an analyst for ESPN, and in that role, he commented on Redskins quarterback Dwayne Haskins. Said he liked Haskins coming out of Ohio State and that he sees a lot of potential there, but he'll leave the deeper evaluations to the offensive staff. Translation, he's leaving that one alone, and that, you know, that's not his place to talk about Dwayne Haskins. And so he said, look, I liked him coming out of Ohio State, but I'll let the offensive guys break him down. And so he left that at that. And then he talked about a sense of urgency, which you need to play with on the defensive side of the football. Jack Del Rio says we have to line up with some urgency. And I think that is key because, remember, this goes back to 2 years ago when we really started seeing this rear its ugly head. And remember, the Redskins had issues lining up, guys pointing pre-snap, and the ball snapped and guys aren't sure which guy they should be covering. And you know how all the pick plays have been killing us. And this goes back to last year. I remember the Indianapolis Colts game at home. Was the first game where we really saw pick plays start to kill the Redskins, and they haven't really cleaned it up since. That's a lack of communication and a lack of getting lined up, and that's the sense of urgency you have to have. You have to line up quickly so that you can identify who is doing what and be able to be ready before the snap actually takes place. As we move on to the next thing that he talked about, improving the defense. At JP Finley NBCS says, asked about the talent on the Redskins defense, Jack Del Rio said, quote, obviously it can be a lot better, closed quote. Del Rio references the poor stats, especially on third downs. Quote, potential really doesn't matter, closed quote. And he's absolutely, again, right. A wise man once told me, potential gets you fired. And so you need guys to realize their potential. You need them to start playing at a high level. The Redskins haven't done that on the defensive side of the football. The Redskins were dead last in third down percentage defensively last year. Teams were converting third downs at over a 50% clip, which is atrocious. Okay, the league average is closer to 39%. The Redskins were all the way up over 50. Just to give you a little bit of framework, this team was horrendous on third downs. And so Del Rio talked earlier about finding ways to get the ball back to the offense, getting off the field on third downs. One of those ways that the Redskins need to improve. Speaking of improvement, at Instant Replay, Jack Del Rio says there's a lot of room for improvement with this defense. Started off his answer by citing how the team was dead last in several major defensive statistical categories. The biggest one being, again, third down defense. At Zach D. Selby, when asked about the Redskins' defensive potential, Del Rio said, quote, "It can be better. There's a lot of room for improvement," closed quote. He later added that potential doesn't matter much to him. All that matters is putting in the work. So, again, that was kind of redundant, and we've talked about that already. But, again, just hammering home the point that he doesn't really care about the potential of this defense. He wants results, and this is a results-based league. You know that. We talk about it all the time, so that's nothing new. You go to the next topic, areas of need. And so this is something we've talked about as fans a ton. At JP Finley NBCS says, Jack Del Rio, information on strengths and weaknesses across the roster, I don't feel like that's in the best interest of the Redskins to share. So not going to be loose-lipped and talking about things that will give a competitive advantage to teams around the league. Don't have a problem with that. At Instant Replay says, quote, "We'll develop those thoughts on what our greatest needs are," closed quote. Jack Del Rio on positions he believes can bolster strength and weaknesses. Del Rio doesn't feel the need to publicly share, doesn't think it helps or is in the best interest of the organization. So reiterating the fact that not going to tell you guys about what our strengths and weaknesses are, but thanks for asking. At Instant Replay once again says, Jack Del Rio ended his phoner with reporters saying that he doesn't want to talk much. He really just wants to get down to business. Says he's excited about the group he has and feels there's a lot of people with pride who want to turn things around. Hashtag HTTR. So again, not wanting to share too much, but wanting you to know, look, there are things that we can definitely clean up and get better, but I just want to get to work. You know, I'm about that action, boss, as a wise man once said. And then we wrap this thing up with communication. And we start out with at Kyle F. Stackpole. Del Rio said that communication is one of the bigger issues that has to improve. Said by watching the tape, it's easy to see players confused or not in the best position to make a play. That led to some big plays allowed in 2019. At JP Finley NBCS says, Jack Del Rio said watching the 2019 Redskins tape, he saw a lot of confusion at the line of scrimmage. He said that must change. Quote, "We have to know what we are doing," closed quote. Zach D. Selby says, Del Rio said communication is something the Redskins can improve on defense. Said the offense gives defenses clues. But, quote, "We don't have the time to look for those clues if we don't know what we're doing to begin with," closed quote. Hashtag HTTR. At John_Kime says, at Pete Haley NBCS closed each of the conference calls with good questions. He asked Del Rio about the communication issues last season. Quote, "That'll be one of the big challenges and areas that will need to improve. All you have to do is watch the tape. Countless examples," closed quote. So Del Rio pretty much telling you everything that we already knew, that this team, now, remember, that was one of the running jokes last year. We would always talk about Minuski and how after a bad defensive performance, when he would step to the podium that following Thursday to speak to the media, that he was going to talk about they need to communicate better. And we said, look, we know they need to communicate better. What are you doing to help that actually take place? And so Del Rio sounds like he's going to be adamant about communication on the field, getting lined up with a sense of urgency so that if changes need to be made, you can do that pre-snap and not be out of sorts when the ball is snapped and have guys running wide open, as we've seen far too many times with this Redskins defense. So that was the Jack Del Rio conference call in a nutshell. Again, you're not going to get much out of Del Rio, and I'm fine with that. I am perfectly fine with him playing it close to the vest. Anything that you feel like is going to give the opposition a potential advantage, keep it to yourself. I'm all for it. So looking forward to see what he's able to do with this defense and how he's able to kind of shape and mold them into his own image and what his ideas for this defense are and what players he thinks can flourish on the field together. What kind of packages is he going to put together? What's the role for a guy like Ryan Kerrigan, especially if you get a Chase Young? These are all things we're waiting to see. It's going to be a while before we actually get to see them, but it's exciting thinking about the prospects nonetheless. Either way, I am your man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Remember, I also am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington Redskins. I will see you guys a little bit later on. Take care. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Have a good one.